Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Organic Gardening for Beginners. My name is Jessica, your host from the blog Homegrown Food and Flowers, and this is the show that teaches you all of the simple and sustainable methods you need to grow your own garden. Today we are talking about 3 gardening truths that will help you have a better, smoother, and possibly even happier season. These are 3 truths that I have learned over many, many years in the garden, and they are not your typical plant in full sun, water on the regular, that type of thing. These are 3 philosophies, we'll call them, that will, I think, help you have a great season, especially if you are coming off of a not so good season and you're getting started fresh this year. Alrighty, so before we jump in, I want to let you know that I have a new freebie, a new resource for you to download that will be linked in the show notes that I think is going to be super helpful. I've mentioned on the show before that I am a vendor at my local farmers market, and both there and emails that I get from folks, listeners, blog readers, one of the most common questions I get is, when should I plant or what should I be doing now? And so I put together a resource for you that has seed starting schedules, seasonal task lists, kind of like checklists, and some notes pages where you can make notes each month in the garden of whether what you need to start, what chores you need to make sure you get done, how to not miss your important planting dates, how to work within your frost dates, your last spring frost and your first fall frost, to basically kind of walk you through the gardening year so that you're not missing important planting dates, but more so that you're not left wondering, well, what should I be doing right now? What can I plant now? Is it too late to plant whatever, lettuce, garlic, whatever it is? And so that resource is totally free, and it's in the show notes, like I said, and I think it's going to be super valuable so that you can get kind of an overview nice and early in the season of what your gardening year might look like. And we're actually going to be talking a lot about garden planning, the year in summary, and what are some of what is the flow of a gardening year like? I think sometimes it's easier to plan if you kind of know where you're going. And so if you have an idea of how long your season is or how long you need to start something from seed indoors before you can plant it, having all of those dates, all that information in one place is really going to be helpful. And this planner is a great companion to the monthly What to Do in the Garden episodes that are still some of the most popular episodes I record. And so anyways, I'll stop talking about it. It's totally free. Go check it out. I think it will definitely help. And so on to these 3 truths. And all 3 are meant to be super encouraging and give you a little bit of a different perspective as you head into this gardening year. And I'll just give them all 3 to you right now, and then we'll jump back and talk about them. So the first one is plants want to grow. The second one is planted is better than perfect. And the third one is there's always next year. And hopefully from having all 3 of those together, you can kind of feel the gist of where I'm going of gardening can be complicated. It can be intimidating. It can be expensive. It can be a very overthought process, or it can be very casual, very laid back, very inexpensive, very in tune with nature. And of course, there's no right or wrong of where you fall on that spectrum, and some of us are a little more controlling on one aspect of gardening and a little more fluid and loose on another. That's neither here nor there for this. What I really want to get across with all of these little truths is enjoy gardening for the amazing hobby and purpose that it is, and keep this perspective in mind. For example, plants want to grow. Think of weeds that grow in the cracks of your driveway that drive you crazy, or the dandelion puffs that sprout up in your lawn when you've done nothing to help germinate them and they're fighting against the turf grass that you've got in there, or the acorns that fall from the oak tree and sprout despite you obviously having done nothing to help them out. These, of course, are weeds and trees and different than our garden plants that we typically plant on purpose. But the idea is the same, that plants want to grow, seeds want to grow. This is their one purpose in their life, is to grow and then make more seeds and propagate themselves. And unfortunately, I feel like, It's easy to say go to Home Depot and look at the 30 different kinds of potting soil and seed starting mix and mulch and fertilizer and manure and compost and all the things and start freaking out and wondering, is this the right thing? Does this have the nutrients it needs? Is this the best type of potting soil to get? Does this have enough perlite in it? And on and on and on until you hit analysis paralysis and you can't make a decision, or you do make a decision and then you're spending all this energy worrying and thinking about it and not enjoying the process. And so by saying plants want to grow, I just want to remind you that put your seeds, your transplants, your seedlings, whatever, in your garden. And chances are, of course, there are extreme, circumstances where your soil is compacted and the roots are having trouble, or the weather is just terrible and you get a freak last frost or something like that. Of course, I totally understand those things come up. But in general, if you plant out a garden, it's going to do something. It might not be the biggest garden ever. It probably won't be the scrawniest garden ever, but it's going to do something. You're going to get a harvest. You're going to get some flowers. You're going to see pollinator activity. You're going to look at it and say, I did that. I'm helping those plants grow by creating this space for them to do their thing. And so if this is your first year, or as I'd mentioned, if you're coming off of kind of a tougher year last season, then keep this in mind. You are there as an awesome middleman for your plants, for your seeds, but when it comes down to it, they want to grow. If you were to put a seed packet outside and walk away from it, it would get rained on, it would get light exposure, it'd get rained on again. Those seeds would probably sprout, even though they are in a relatively unhospitable environment in a seed packet. They're not even in the soil, but they want to grow. And you might even get something off of them depending on what it is. So just keep this in mind if you're feeling intimidated, frustrated, any of those negative feelings about the garden season. The next thing I want to talk about is planted is better than perfect. And this is a little mantra that I have been telling myself in the last year or two. I didn't always feel this way because, as I've even mentioned on this show before, I was much more regimented in my plantings and, used traditional rows, and I was very organized and methodical, and I have relaxed that control a lot over the last few years, but especially in these last two, as we've gone through having kids and a big move and huge life changes and all that, to where I just need to get these plants in the ground because this is their time, or this is the time in the season, in order for them to mature in time. And I just need to get them out. And so I have to remind myself, planted is better than perfect. Your rows might be crooked. You might have one lettuce plant here, another lettuce plant there, two lettuce plants over there. And that's okay. They're in the ground. Just like I had said before, they're going to grow. Then you're going to be able to harvest off of them. And it's better to get something in the ground and get it growing than spend time over planning or waiting to plant because you're like, oh, I haven't finished designing my new landscaped bed, or I haven't figured out the perfect dimensions of my raised bed. Again, the analysis paralysis, whether it's gardening or business or meal prep or parenting, it can just be a total roadblock that prevents you from actually doing anything. So let this mantra be a reminder that some sort of action is better than nothing, and planted is better than perfect. Thirdly, and this is my favorite one, is there's always next year. No matter what type of gardener you talk to, if you talk to anybody who's grown for at least a season or two, chances are they've said the same thing to themselves or to somebody else. There's always next year. And this might feel like an odd thing to say considering this year has barely started. It's January 7th right now. But I really want you to keep this in mind as you're going forward because, again, speaking from my own experience, we're on this new property. We moved here last June, so we've been here just over 6 months. And I feel the pressure to do everything this year. Get my fruit trees in, build out my hoop house, put in more raised beds, have an awesome spring planting, an awesome fall planting, get my chickens integrated into my composting system, get goats to help with the compost, like everything. My to-do list is just absurdly long, and I feel the pressure, even as somebody with tons of experience and tons of years telling myself there's always next year. I still feel that. And so if you are feeling like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that, and this is the year I got to get this thing done, I totally identify with you. But there's always next year. Gardening is a lifelong hobby, practice, purpose, and whatever you don't get to this year will be waiting for you next year. And as a extension of that, any failures that you have this year, you have another chance to to fix them. Maybe that was a Freudian slip right there. You have another chance next year to fix it and do it right. So if you planted too late and your flowers didn't bloom before the frost came, or you planted your lettuce too closely together and so the slugs are just having a party in between the leaves and eating everything, or you forgot to put up your row cover on some of your overwintering flowers and they all turned to mush in the frost. Guess what? You can fix all that next year. And each of those 3 examples are things that I have done in the last few months just here on this property. I just went out to go harvest some lettuce today for lunch, and there are slugs everywhere because I just planted too closely, and they've got all this leaf cover to hang out in, and it's a real pain in the butt now. But I'm making a mental note to myself, put a little more space between your lettuce plants. Rookie mistake, right? Total rookie move. I should know better, and I didn't. Well, I did, and I did it anyways. But I'm reminding myself, well, I'm planting lettuce again in a month. I'll just give it more space next time, and hopefully the slugs are a little bit less of an issue. As always, my ego is not so big that I can't admit when I make mistakes or just acknowledge, hey, I probably didn't do that the best way. But you know what? Perfect example of my other 3 truths of planted is better than perfect. I got the lettuce out there, so it did grow. I am harvesting from it. I am eating from it. Seeds want to grow. They're too close. The slugs are a real pain on them, but they're growing anyways to where they are harvestable. And I'm making my note of there's always next year, or in this case, next month, where I will improve on what I just did and what I just learned from. This feels like a very almost meta little moment. And hopefully it all can kind of come together to give you some encouragement for this coming season, some perspective on the season past or the season that's coming up, and just 3 little things, philosophies to keep in mind as you're heading into the season. And I even mentioned this a little bit last week where, we talk about I've got to add a new garden bed and how am I going to maximize my garden and improve my garden. And I reminded you, maybe this is your year to step back and take out a garden bed or take a few plants off your list to make it more manageable. Don't feel like you have to put more on your plate or attempt that new thing or, I flopped on this last year, so I've got to do it again this year. There are no rules. If you had a failure last year and you're not wanting to try to fix it this year, great. Stick it on the list for the year after this one. It doesn't matter. Gardening is year after year until you die. And there's plenty of time to figure out the optimal spacing for your lettuce plants so that the slugs aren't getting in there and eating everything, or remembering to put up your row covers so that the frost doesn't come and kill everything. Keep gardening fun. Keep it joyful. Keep it productive at a level that you can manage. And remember, there's always next year. Your plants totally want to grow, and only you and maybe your neighbor really care what your garden looks like because nature just wants to get out there and do its thing. All right. Don't forget about that freebie in the show notes. It will help you with planning your year as you keep these 3 things in mind and keep it chill. Next week, we are going to be talking a little bit more about garden planning. I've got some tips to keep in mind as you are lining up your gardening year. Really, all of January is we're talking about garden planning, how to do it, some of the philosophies behind it, and how to take advantage of this awesome time of the year where you are planning out the season to come. And as a quick way to end up the episode, if you have any topics that you are interested in, that you are curious for more of an explanation, or you want help with before the season gets really into the thick of it, shoot me an email. My email is in the show notes, as well as the link for the freebie for you, because I always want to talk about the topics that are super interesting to you and that you need the most help with, so that you can have an awesome gardening season. So feel free to throw suggestions my way, and I will work them in and help you out. Talk to you next week. Bye.